This is the update on where we are and where we're going. My name's Professor Oliver Mallett from Stirling Management School, and I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the research. Probably you're familiar with it, but a quick introduction, then talk to you a little bit about space in people's homes and how that's played out in the latest, the latest lockdown, I guess, primarily. So, always have to flag up that the research is paid for by UK Research and Innovation. Obviously, we're very grateful to them for funding our research. The background, you might have noticed last March, the proverbial hit the fan. We had an announcement of a national lockdown. All of a sudden, many of us, certainly not all, but many of us had to start really rethinking our jobs and the way we work and to work from home. So prior to COVID, 2019, only 5% of the UK labour force were fully working from home, although about 27% were sometimes working from home. Once we suddenly hit this lockdown, April 2020, suddenly nearly half of the workforce in the UK were from home. So really radical overnight change. This home-based working created new possibilities, new opportunities for people, but also a range of particular challenges and pitfalls. We set out to research this through two main avenues. The first one is a series of repeat semi-structured interviews with a cohort of about 80 people, of which those of you with us today are probably all members of that cohort. And we've come back to you about every 3 months to kind of see how things are going, how things are changing, how you're experiencing things. We've also ran 2 surveys. So each of the surveys surveyed about 1,400 people across the UK, similar kinds of issues that we explored in the interviews, but obviously much less detail, but many more people to kind of see the general patterns that we could then explore in the interviews. So the first survey was in the summer, the second in the winter that's just been. So the point of this is to try and capture the experience of this really unprecedented period of home working during a time of crisis. That's been obviously very strange and for some people very difficult time. So it's to get new understanding and to gain insights in the new expectations of workers, the support systems that have been put in place by organisations or not, and the ways in which technology has been used to support these new ways of working. So in the presentation today, I'll be speaking first, talking about home working spaces. Then my colleague Abigail will take over to talk about new pace of work. Colleague Leela will then take over to talk about the future of hybrid working particularly, and my colleague Danny will conclude talking about how employees view the future. So, home working space. Before getting into the experiences of space itself, I think one of the things that's really important to emphasize when we think about home working and how it's been over the last, say, 14 months, is it's not normal. It's not normal home working, and working from home isn't the only factor shaping the impacts on people's working lives. So it's one, working arrangements have changed, people working from home, some people have been furloughed, some people have very mixed working patterns, but the other factors that equally shape our working lives, the COVID related restrictions. So I think this is important because lockdown, where we can't go out, we can't socialize, we can't do things. Obviously, that has a huge impact when we're then working from home. We can't leave, we can't go out at the end of the working day, things like that. So that's a second major impact. And then the other third impact is COVID itself. So for some of us, we may have experienced COVID, or someone in our family may have had it. Because of underlying health issues, we may have particular concerns about COVID. Obviously, some people have suffered from long COVID. So there's these 3 big, really new types of impacts on our working lives, and they'll interact for different people in different ways. And I won't go into this in detail, but the core point here is that some people may not be working from home. Some people may not be particularly impacted by the restrictions for whatever reason. Some people may not be directly impacted by COVID. Others will. And so we get a real variability in terms of the impacts of the last 14 months on our working lives. It's also important to emphasize that pre-existing structural inequalities, for example, people in low socioeconomic groups who may have less resources, we can most easily think of it in terms of the difference between someone in a 1-bedroom flat and someone in a large house with a garden. These things are also going to impact how we experience it. So what's happening at home? If we look at physical space, and this is data from our most recent survey over the winter, we find that there's a difference in terms of some people have a dedicated home space to work in, so a spare room that they've converted into office would be the classic, and some people haven't. So the 46% of people who don't have a dedicated home space to work in may be experiencing home-based working very differently than those who do. Interestingly, this differs by gender. So if we look at it in terms of men and women respondents to our survey, those reporting to have a dedicated office, 60% of men do compared to only 49% of women. Or if we look at it the other way around, 51% of women don't have a dedicated space. So there are some gender differences. It's not to say obviously all men have a home working space or women don't or anything. It's just to say that there are differences in terms of gender, and the availability of a dedicated space in which to work can shape people's experiences of working from home during this time. If we look at the impacts of this kind of factor on things like stress, we asked people in our survey whether they've been more stressed due to pressures of family matters, and found it difficult to concentrate on their work. On questions like this, we found a difference in terms of their home spaces. So here we looked at it, the blue is people in relatively less crowded homes, the green is people in relatively more crowded homes. So here we find that people in less crowded homes have experienced this stress, this difficulty in concentrating less than those in more crowded home spaces. So not necessarily surprising, but it's important that what it emphasizes is these variable experiences, these different experiences for different people. From the interview quotes, and if you see yourself in these interviews at all, you'll notice that as part of anonymizing them, they're very broad. We identify someone's gender and a very vague sense of what their job or industry is. So this woman that we talked to said that they're working in their bedroom. So they're sleeping in the same place they're working. They keep the living space, the living room, as somewhere where they interact with their family. And so they are very much in one space, which clearly is going to have a lot of negatives, but there's also positives. She talks about how she has it very nicely set up. There's a clear, nice workspace. She's got a window with bird feeders, attracted by the birds. So it's a mixed picture. And this is what we find quite a lot in a lot of the interviews that we've conducted. I think a second factor, and something that's important on understanding this impact of space, is what's the responsibility or what's the forms of support that are offered by our employers, by our organisations. So in this question, we asked whether the organisation provides necessary resources or budgets to enable me to adjust my working environment. In the first survey, those of you in the last webinar seen, we asked about provision of say computers and things like that. Here we're starting to focus more on adjusting the home. We've now been working from home, some of us constantly, for 14 months. Home working is clearly going to be part of the future. And here we find 54% say that their organisation has provided the resources, the budget, but nearly half of the respondents haven't. They've only had very basic support or no support at all in terms of adjusting their homes. So again, the experience of the home, the ability to adjust or adapt the home to be able to work from home effectively, is very different for different people. So one final quote before I conclude this section. Again, the complexities, the pressures on home spaces. So this participant told us that almost their home doesn't feel like their home anymore. They say that the office workspace and the private are very separate because of the setting, and when they go into the kitchen, they see the laptop, they see the computer. When they go into the living room, they see the office, they see a workspace, and this has an impact on the ability to separate out home and work. And for some people, that's created a kind of pressure and stress and a difficulty in escaping work that might be different for those who do have a dedicated home office, a spare room where they can shut the door and lock off work. So I think for this section, the main thing I want to emphasize is just the importance of understanding the home, how it's experienced very differently by different people, and it has created pressures. Some organizations are supporting that with resources and budget, some organizations aren't. With that, I'll pass across to Abigail.
Hi, I am Professor Abigail Marks, and I'm Professor of the Future of Work at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne. And what I want to talk to you about is the new pace of work. So one of the things that has become really, really apparent to us as a project team is the immense increase in the pace of work, and the impact of that on participants. And we believe that there are three reasons that work has changed, and we've called this overburden. Overs in brackets because work shouldn't be a burden anyway, but for many people it is. So we've argued that there are three really broad reasons for the COVID pandemic leading to enhanced burdening of work. So the first is because of the pandemic. Often people have got additional work due to the furlough of colleagues, the change in the role, and the change in enhanced procedures to be compliant with either home working or, in particular, COVID. The second form of overburden is really as a response to home working. So management of shared space, a bit, as Oliver's talked about, establishing the home working space, homeschooling, the management of access to colleagues and employees, other employees, and the artifacts that we need for work. And thirdly, which is possibly the most long-term issue, the response to remote working technology. So understanding new systems, how using Zoom and Teams has really changed the pace of work, and also factors such as being monitored at home because of the enhanced use of technology. So if you look at this diagram from our winter survey, which is the survey that we undertook December, January, what we have is some quite worrying data on how people are feeling. So we have 43% of people on quite a large survey saying they're feeling unhappy and depressed. And also a significant number of people feeling that they're constantly under strain. So nearly 40% of people saying they're constantly under strain. This is not okay. This really isn't okay. And we believe, as we've said before, there's a number of reasons for this. So there's the overburdening because of the pandemic itself. And we've got two quotes here, and I'll just read one of them to you, which is the last round of interviews. And this is a quote from an admin officer. "I'm tired, there's no doubt. And the second lockdown seems to be hitting everybody much harder. It's almost as if we held our breath to get through the first lot, and then especially my colleagues that have got children, they're really finding it hard going. And the teachers ramped up quite a lot, and my kids seem to require proper supervision. Then there's a knock-on effect for us that isn't in the situation that is then." So what she is saying is that people who don't have children are actually having to take responsibility for work because other people are having to manage additional childcare in the last lockdown. So everybody is overburdened because of the pandemic. Then there's obviously the overburden because of this move to home working, that the systems are not as smooth as they are if you're based in the office. So again, we have a participant in the last round of interviews saying, "Because the casework takes much more like things I could do on the phone during the day, I usually do writing in night and send it over. So I get it quickly done. If I raise a complaint with someone on the phone on behalf of a client, it takes me 5 minutes. If I have to do it in writing officially, it takes me like half an hour to draft a proper good letter." So I think it's hard to manage the time because in the evening time, I'm more tired. And it's usually that I end up going to bed like midnight, and I really wish I could get back to normal hours and be back in the office. And then you have the overburdening of work due to the pace of work. And this is the fact that people are booking in meetings, meeting after meeting after meeting, in a way that you would not do if you're in the office. You would never book in a meeting 9 till 10, 10 till 11, 11 till 12, 12 till 1 with no break in the middle. You just wouldn't do it. I mean, for the sheer practicality you have to get from one meeting room to another, you would always build in a break. Well, that is not what is happening, and now people are working from home. And what you're finding here is, if you look at this graph, you've got people working quite a lot of a high proportion of their day is spent using collaborative or video technology in order to manage these meetings. And you've got quite worrying, you've got sort of 13% of men and 10% of women, 7 to 10 hours on using collaborative technology, meeting-based technology. And even, you know, you've got nearly 40% of people 3 to 6 hours. So people are really spending a lot of time in online meetings. And this enhanced use of technology, or this use of technology, is having a significant impact on people's work burden. So respondents, particularly from the survey, and also, as you can see from the interviews, we put a very clear relationship between the time they spend using this collaborative technology, so Zoom or Teams, and the intensity of their overall work demands. So the more time that people spend using video conferencing technology, collaborative technology, the greater this perception of always working. The greater time they spend, spend using collaborative technology, the more you feel you're too frazzled to actually participate in family activities and external responsibilities. A significant proportion of people, 32%, believe technology employees forces you to work at increasingly tight time schedules. You have to work more than you can handle, and a quarter of people believe that technology forces people to work faster than they used to. So these are quite meaningful numbers. This is a significant number of people. So, I mean, I have a quick poll question for you here. I'm hoping the poll has come up. I think Danny is now the poll man. But do you think you can actually sustain your current pace of work? Do you think it is sustainable? I know there's only a few people here, but it'd be quite interesting, even if my colleagues respond to it as well. It would be very useful to see how people are managing this enhanced pace of work. How's it gone, Danny? Have we got the poll?
Yeah, so the results are 20% yes, 40% say no, and 40% are not sure yet. Oh no, it's changing. Now it's a third each. And it's changing, people are still voting. And the majority is not sure yet with 43%, 29 saying no, and less than a third saying yes.
Okay, so it's quite a small number of people, but there is still some indication that people are being forced to work and not able to continue this pace of work. So I'm now going to hand over to Leela, who's going to talk about the future of hybrid working.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Leela Skontridaki. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a lecturer in Organization Studies at the University of Edinburgh Business School. And I thought for today to focus on the future of hybrid work, exactly because a number of organizations, a quite large number of organizations, and that is both very large, but SMEs as well, do consider moving forward to adopt hybrid work patterns. So just, apologies, let's move to the next slide. So this slide shows the results that come from the winter survey in the question of the following. Once all restrictions imposed to tackle COVID-19 have been lifted, what is the ideal percentage of your formal working week based at home? So I think what's most interesting in the results is exactly how diverse they are. So 23% want to work maybe up to a day, equivalent, full-time equivalent from home, and then 16% maybe 1 or 2 days, and so on. So the question then becomes, what does that mean for the organizations? Because a lot of them want to continue with hybrid work patterns. So what does it mean also for managers and managing their teams? What does it mean for collaborative work and keeping everyone happy? So how can we picture hybrid meetings, basically, where some staff are working from work and some are in the office? So how would all that work, and at the same time try to keep everyone happy, satisfy the business needs? And eventually, what does that imply for the office space and the office arrangements? Because we've seen a lot of companies moving on, axing their spaces and stopping leasing some of their offices. So it's quite interesting then to see what's going to happen in the next maybe 2 or 3 years. So I wanted then to, I went back and I took a look into how our respondents have basically explained, so what are the reasons that they want to work from home and they want to work in the office. And most of them obviously offer different reasons for working from home or in the office. And I think it's quite interesting to see that there is a wide range of reasons. Some of the reasons imply that staff are pulled to the office. They want to go back for a number of reasons, but there are also some push away factors at the same time. So they don't want to go back to the office because maybe they're not happy with something. So if we start with at the left, with one of the green reasons there, or group of reasons, it relates a lot for some people to the perceived quality of the home office versus the office at the workplace. So we've heard participants say that they might have been working in an office environment they're not very happy with, and that works as a push away factor from the office because they can basically have a better control over their home office environment. So they can have better control of the light, they can have better control of the temperature, they might have a better view, and most importantly, especially for those that they have been working in open plan offices, they might be able to have a less noisy environment. Of course, as Oliver commented before, it's very different for different people depending on their individual circumstances and whom they live with. But it's very interesting to see that one of the main reasons that people may want to work from home or not is the perceived quality of their workstation in the office and at home. And something that I touched upon before in the previous event, I'm not sure how many of you were there, but an important reason as well is the nature of work and tasks. So, for example, it's not unusual for social workers to say that due to emotional labor and the support they might need and take from their colleagues, they much prefer working to a great extent in the office, exactly because when they have emotionally challenging circumstances, then they have the peer support. And there are similar feelings when it comes to very, very creative types of work or even simpler collaborative work. So say some of our participants being architects, they obviously explained that not all of it, not all of the work can be done remotely as well as in the office. And again, the need for social interaction might be a pull to the office factor. But for some people, there was actually a desire to minimize social interaction when that was not deemed as welcome or necessarily pleasant. And then, of course, the caring responsibilities, health and disabilities was also an important factor. So some people with chronic pain have found that they have benefited a lot working from home because they wouldn't have, say, to take the bus and travel. Whereas for others, physical health has been a lot worse because they were engaged in active travel. Another interesting finding, maybe for a minority, but still significant, is for those that they have family abroad, so foreign nationals, some of them took the advantage or the opportunity to work for maybe a few weeks from far. So they went back to visit their home place and they found that a great opportunity. So they would want at least one of the participants, I remember, said she negotiated with her employer to change her contract so that she can go back and work a few weeks every year from home. And then, of course, the last factor is the distance from work, and that would rely upon whether people have to commute or they actually enjoy traveling, and that is because maybe they're engaged in active travel, which basically then leads us to a number of dilemmas to be resolved when looking into the future of hybrid work and hybrid teams. So to a great extent, managers then will have to try and balance and resolve some of the dilemmas. One question would be, so for those that they they do want to go on and adopt a hybrid working pattern. So would it be that there are fixed days for all team members to come into the office, or would it be fully flexible so that team members actually pick and choose which days to come in, and that by association has implications about the office space and what do they do with maybe reducing or changing their offices and the office structure. It also causes dilemmas about IT equipment and support. So just to give an example, what I mentioned before, how do we move on then to run hybrid meetings? Would we need different types of technology to support kind of fair and good experience when it comes to participating in hybrid meetings where not everyone is in the same room? Closely related to that and the two previous issues or dilemmas is how do then companies go about and change their office space? And I think quite interesting is also the question about, or the finding that very often managers and staff have different expectations when it comes to hybrid work patterns. And I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that we would anticipate maybe conflict or resentment because there might be a gap between the two managers and non-managers. So other questions that they may come up: how do we make sure that staff well-being, burnout, and transitions are managed better, and what kind of support is given to staff? And also moving on to adopt more hybrid working patterns, what would that mean for new members of staff, and how can they take advantage of all the informal learning opportunities that typically new members of staff take advantage of? And maybe one last point is about team building. So what activities or actions are to be taken if team building is to be maintained. And that might be easier indeed for well-established teams that members know very well one another. But when it comes maybe to new members of staff, that might raise some concerns. So one question I have to you before I finish is, are there actually hybrid work guidelines being developed in your organization? Are you aware of that? Yes, no, or maybe you're not sure? So what's going on in your organization?
People are still voting. What I have so far is a very clear split. 40% saying yes and 60% saying not sure yet.
That's very, very interesting. So no one really said yes. No, sorry, no one said no. So they're maybe not aware. It's a good assumption. I would expect that most of the companies would be planning something just now. So thank you very much for listening. I'll hand over to Danny.
Yeah, thank you. Just to update you, the poll has increased to not sure yet with 2/3 and 1/3 saying
Okay.
yes. Okay, great. I'm going to take control now. Yeah, thank you. So moving on from Leela's presentation on the complex reasons for people to being pushed and pulled between home and the office and the potential dilemmas, I'd like to briefly talk to you about what people want going forward, also what businesses want going forward, and also about the potential risks and key issues in this, especially intermediate stage of this new hybrid working arrangement world. Sorry. It's not moving. Do I need to do? Oh, there you go. So first of all, there's a bit of an overlap, but bear with me. First of all, comparing our two services, surveys asking people about the ideal percentage of their formal working week to be based at home once all restrictions imposed to tackle COVID-19 have been lifted. We found that in general responses for both surveys are quite evenly spread out, as also Lila mentioned, ranging from 1 to 5 days a week. But the overall trend shows that now more people want to go back to the office. So in the summer survey, 1/3 of respondents wanted 50 to 100% of their week to be based at the office, whereas in our winter survey, half of our respondents wanted 50 to 100% of their week to be based at the office. The next couple of slides present findings from our recent round of interviews on people's idea splits and also their concerns. So altogether, there are 4 illustrative quotes from 3 participants, which I will read out to you now. So a female project and funding officer said this: so yes, everybody is tired, fed up, wanting it all to end and wanting us all to be back to work. The novelty element has started to wear off a bit. I would want to go back 60 to 40. I think I would want to be part of my time at home, part of my time at work. Another male participant, who's a complaints officer for a hotel chain, said this: I would love discretion over when I can go to the office and when I can work from home, as I will be doing the school runs. My office is very close to the school, so I wouldn't mind I decide and say tomorrow I'm working from home and the day after I would like to work in the office, so that I can have discretion over when I can work from home and when I can work in the office, and even find short-term solutions. Half a day at the office, half a day at home, 2 weeks administration. Another female advisor who works part-time said these things. First of all, so we don't have so many rooms available for everyone. We don't. So there will be probably like, we will be working some days from home, some days from the office, because it's just not doable to do it for everyone for every day. Then she goes on to say, well, it's supposed to be that altogether I will work 16 hours a week, but I usually end up working more. I do. So I think it's hard to manage the time, because in the evening time, I'm like more tired. And it's usually that I end up like, going to bed like midnight. And I really wish I could get back to normal hours and to be back to the office. Well, if there will be a chance for me to be in the office for 2 days, that would be lovely. So if I could work 1 day from home and 2 days from the office, and I think whenever the chance comes, I will ask for it, because I'm the only one, I think, who has been out of the office for so long, like not going at all, because I was the one who was shielding. And what did businesses say? What are they saying? So 2/3 of employers plan to introduce and enable more home and hybrid working over the next 6 to 12 months, but less than 1/3 of employers are planning to try to increase the uptake of other forms of flexible working over the next 6 to 12 months. Also, businesses who are moving to a hybrid model plan to cut their property footprint, cutting a large percentage of their office spaces. And other companies see home working as not sustainable and not becoming a new normal, and expecting their office, their staff to return to the office and back to their desks as soon as possible. So what we can see here, there has been a cultural shift in organizations, and barriers to remote working have faded away, but there are potential risks and pitfalls to hybrid and flexible working arrangements in this interim stage beyond health and safety issues. For example, there is a risk of enforced hybrid working as compared to optional hybrid working as top-down and imposed, instead of collaboratively and mutually agreed in dialogue with employees. Also, another risk is that these arrangements are more formal rather than informal arrangements, for example, leading to unfavorable contractual changes. Another danger is of a non-inclusive, unfair treatment of workers, leading to direct or indirect discrimination, for example, in regards to pay, affecting people's promotion through visibility bias, also a biased form of staggered return, vaccination bias, and so on. A further risk is businesses prioritizing their needs, like focusing on productivity and cost-saving measures, rather than having a balanced approach with priorities on health, safety, and well-being of their employees. And one furthermore risk is that managers and organizations may not be centering these new arrangements on the notion of trust and mutually agreed outcome-based performance, but rather seek to implement new performance measures which could detrimentally impact the well-being of workers. So key issues that organizations need to focus on is to develop the skills and the culture needed for an open conversation about well-being, and encourage boundary setting and routines to improve well-being and to prevent overwork. And they also need to ensure effective coordination of tasks and task-related communication. Furthermore, they need to build in time, including face-to-face time, for team cohesion and organizational belonging, by facilitating networking and relationships across team, but also organizing a wider support network to compensate for the loss of informal learning. And last but not least, it is important that the current hybrid working arrangements should be tried and learned from, rather than being set in stone. So thank you very much. Over to you, Abigail.
Thank you very much, Danny. So really, I am just here to say thank you. We couldn't have done this without you. The insights from this project have had an enormous impact, and is hopefully making a really meaningful change to the way this country is going to operate in the future. So we've been part of the evidence given to the House of Lords, the Welsh Government, and a House of Commons briefing note. We've also given multiple talks to industry and businesses, as well as making contributions to academic conferences and academic seminars. So we'd really like to reassure you, everybody taking part, that this is making a difference. We are hopefully having a really, really positive response here.